Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to this Practice 1 and Practice 2 review for the 2018 Italian Grand Prix. How are we all doing? I hope you're doing well, and we are going to go through, slowly but surely, this review of Practice 1 and 2. And here we are at Monza. This is pretty much the last European race of the European season, so it's sad to see the European season ending, considering how good it has been. But here we are at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix, and these are your results for FP1 and FP2 in case you missed them. Now, Practice 1 was held in wet conditions. That is why Sergio Perez finished fastest of all, with Kimi Raikkonen second, Ocon third, Hartley fourth, Ricciardo fifth, Gasly in sixth, Verstappen in seventh, Sainz in eighth, Hülkenberg ninth, and Valtteri Bottas in P10. Not really a representative session, to be honest. And then the bottom 10 was Hamilton, Leclerc, Magnussen, Alonso, Grosjean, Ericsson, Vettel, Sirotkin, Stroll, and Lando Norris, of course, taking Van Dorn's place in again another free practice outing for Lando Norris. And then in Practice 2, which was held in dry conditions, where we had representative lap times, this is what happened. Sebastian Vettel was fastest, from Kimi Raikkonen second and Hamilton third, Bottas fourth, then the two Red Bulls of Verstappen and Ricciardo fifth and sixth, then the two Force Indias looking very good in P7 and P8, and then Leclerc ninth and Hülkenberg in 10th. And the bottom 10 is Grosjean, Sainz, Magnussen, Gasly, Sirotkin, Hartley, Stroll, Alonso, Van Dorn, and Marcus Ericsson did not set a lap time, and we will get into why later on. It was an interesting reason, I'll put it that way, as to why he did not set a lap time. But first, we'll go through the top teams and see how they did. First off, Mercedes. They are basically where I thought they would be. They're not miles off Ferrari, but they're definitely not as quick. Ferrari have, I would say, a quarter of a second in their pocket over Mercedes. I think Mercedes, if they get some luck, could get onto the front row in qualifying, and maybe could, in the race again, if they do have some luck, challenge for a race win. But in terms of out-and-out speed, Mercedes do not have the speed to beat Ferrari this weekend. If Ferrari don't have any issues, Mercedes should finish, if they don't have any issues themselves, third and fourth. They just do not have the pace of those two Ferrari cars. And I think in qualifying tomorrow, yeah, second row is what I see for them. I don't see anything really any better for those two cars. Next up is Ferrari, of course, at their home circuit. And in Practice 2, they look as quick as I thought they would. They're not miles out in front, but they definitely have a clear advantage over Mercedes. Quarter of a second just today. And as we know, on a Friday, Ferrari tend to hold back a bit of pace. So tomorrow, once they turn it up even more, they might be able to stretch that to half a second. You don't know. Ferrari, I think, have a lot more in the locker to, to bring out in tomorrow's qualifying session and the race. But looking good for Ferrari, and if they don't get pole position or a front row, I would be very, very shocked. They have the pace to do it, and if they want to win the title this year, they have to do it tomorrow, and it looks as though they are going to do so. But for Red Bull, they just don't have the pace. We all know why. We all know why. It's because the Renault power unit, even though they have an upgraded one for this race, it's not good enough. It's nowhere near good enough to be up there with Ferrari and Mercedes. And in qualifying, they're going to finish up where they finished in Practice 2. It's going to be 5th and 6th, even though Daniel Ricciardo will not start in either 5th or 6th. He'll be starting, I don't know if it's at the back or near the back. I haven't checked what the exact penalty is, but it's going to be pretty much at the back of the field. And yeah, there's nothing Red Bull can do this weekend. They just need to hope for wet weather. That's the only thing they can hope for. Or massive luck in terms of reliability problems for both Ferraris and Mercedes. That's the only thing they can hope for. They're that slow when it comes to those two teams. So, again, nothing they can do in normal conditions. But, guys, what do you think about these top three teams? Do you think Mercedes can do anything to beat Ferrari this weekend? And if you do, how so? Do you think it's Ferrari's to lose at this race? Do you think Ferrari will get pole position? Do you think they'll get the front row, given the pace they've shown so far? And, yeah, do you think it's theirs to lose in terms of the race win once we get to Sunday? And for Red Bull, do you think they can do anything to get close to Ferrari and Mercedes? And do you think they might be under threat from maybe Force India in qualifying? What do you think about that? Let me go to the chat now and see what some of you guys are saying. Nikki says, looking good for Ferrari so far. It looks very good. Even though Sebastian Vettel didn't have the smoothest of practice 2 sessions, he went off at the Parabolica. Very lucky he didn't seriously break his rear wing. He really could have, but he was a bit lucky there. But in terms of pace, it looks perfect. Perfect for Ferrari. The C-Spec power unit, still abysmal. Loving it. That's from Nikki. That's about the Renault. The new Renault power unit in the Red Bull. And yeah, it might, you know, improve the lap time a bit. But they're so far off Ferrari and Mercedes, it's still not making a sizable or clear difference. Sarah Lee says, let's hope this smaller Red Bull wing gives Max a chance to get pole position. So waiting for it to then continue his history making. If Max Verstappen gets pole at Monza, then it will be the biggest, or one of the biggest surprises of the season. There's absolutely no chance, in my opinion, of Max Verstappen getting pole. If you want to see him get pole, you're going to have to wait until Singapore. I think that's the next chance of him or Red Bull getting a pole position. JB says, could Force India / Haas out-qualify Red Bull on the dry? After what we've seen in practice 2, I don't think so, but I think they can get close. You know, the two Force Indias were only half a second off. I think Ricciardo or Verstappen. So they can get close, but I'm not sure they can actually out-qualify the Red Bulls. I think Red Bull have enough in the corners to stay ahead of Force India and Haas. Gina, McLaren will be on pole. We'll get to them very, very soon. Joseph Hernandez, Mercedes will probably be in P2 or P3 or P4. Force India might be on the podium. They're going to need a crazy race for that to happen. I don't see them getting a podium. I think they can finish. If Red Bull have reliability issues or are very slow for some reason in the race down the straights, then they might be able to get 5th again and 6th. But I don't think they can get anywhere near a podium, I'm afraid. Me Too on Cube says, Ferrari just has a better car this year. If they stop screwing up, they can't be stopped. I've been saying that, I think, since the start of the season, since Bahrain China time. They have had this year the fastest car of the season. You cannot deny that. At least 75% of the races, Ferrari have had the best car. But it's just half the time they've screwed it up. And if they don't screw up going, from now until Abu Dhabi, they should win the title. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think there are plenty of screw-ups left for that team to make. Legendary Snipers, hey Chaz, I just joined because of school. JB, I would love Ocon to get a podium. I would as well. I'm a big fan of Ocon. I think he's been severely underrated this season. I think he's not been talked about enough. He has been very, very good. Even though I think Perez is ahead of him in the Drivers' Championship, I think Ocon has been better than Perez this season. He just has had some unlucky moments. For example, the crash in Baku with Raikkonen. I think in Spain, where Perez finished 9th, I think Ocon was in that position and then his engine failed. So I think Ocon has been very unlucky this season. So, yeah, he should, I think he deserves a podium. He has been very good this season. Joseph Hernandez, Force India might beat Force India a lot if it rains. I don't see that happening, even though they were first and third in practice 1. It wasn't representative at all. Everyone, I think, had all their power units, especially the top teams, had their power units turned down, so not to, explode them in practice 1. Yes, Ocon is very underrated. The way I say Ocon is different to the way you say it. That's from JB. I don't think there's a different way of saying it, or at least I haven't heard one, so be interesting to hear if there's a different way of saying it. I've never heard one. Sarah Lee says, just want the championship to go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. I am desperately hoping for that, and I think that'd be the best for F1 if it went down to Abu Dhabi. Even if Ferrari, between now and the end of the season, have the best car and win most of the races going till Abu Dhabi, it would be great if it, climaxed at the final race. It always is. You never know what's going to happen in the final race, so hopefully it does go down to that race. Now let's move on to some midfield teams. And first off, McLaren, of course, they are nowhere near, getting even out Q1 with the pace they've been showing. They actually look slower than Williams. That is very, very poor. I think there is a possibility that both McLarens, in qualifying, they won't be lining up at the back in the race, but in qualifying, I think there's a very good chance that McLaren could end up in both 19th and 20th. They are that bad. At least with Williams, they do have good straight line speed. Even, the car, yes, aerodynamically, and the chassis is so bad, but at least they do have some good straight line speed. McLaren doesn't have that, and it's worsened by the fact that they have such a draggy car, which is not helping them when it comes to, this kind of track. So if they get out Q1 with one of their cars, it will be a miracle. If Fernando Alonso is able to get that car into Q2, that will be one of the best performances I think he's done in qualifying, maybe in his career. And I'm serious, and I know that sounds very, outstanding, but this car is nowhere near, say, a Sauber or a Toro Rosso. It's nowhere near. It's so slow. So, yeah, I don't see how they get out of Q1. I do not see a possibility. Maybe if it rains, but, I haven't checked the weather forecast, but normally at this race, even though it did rain in practice 1, normally it's dry. So, yeah, not looking good for McLaren. Onto Renault. Not looking too bad for Renault so far, but after Friday practice in Spa, they were kind of in the same positions, and we saw how that turned out. I still don't think they'll get into Q3. I think the best they can hope for is, 13th, 14th, something like that. I don't see how they can possibly get into Q3. Their power unit is so bad right now in terms of straight line speed performance. And yeah, they just need to, I think, in qualifying and the race, before they get to Singapore where they should be good, this race has to be damage limitation for Renault, because they're not going to beat Haas on genuine out-and-out pace. They just need to hope that Haas mess it all up, or someone ahead messes it all up, and they can try and get into the points, because I do not see how Renault can get anywhere near the top 10 in both qualifying and the race. But for Force India, again, best of the rest in P7 and P8, and they look to me, with the upgrades they've finally brought to the car since Lawrence Stroll has invested now in the team, they're basically back to the level they were at this time last year. They're basically back to a 2017 level of performance. That is very, very good to see. Can they maintain that for qualifying in the race? I think they will. If you look at history, Force India at this track always tend to be in the top 10 in qualifying and at least with one of their cars, will get a points finish. So I don't see how a Haas or a Sauber can get in there and, you know, get in between or ahead of those two Force Indias. I just don't see it. I think Force India are too fast for the other cars in the midfield, and if they get some luck, they might be able to finish in P6 or P5 in the race or even qualifying. So we'll see, but it looks very good for Force India, and I think after this race they will overtake both Toro Rosso and Sauber. If they don't overtake Toro Rosso at this race, it'll be probably by Singapore or Russia. They look very, very good right now, and it's great to see. But guys, what do you think about McLaren? Do you think they can get a car into Q2? I don't think there is any chance of it. Do you think Renault can get into Q3? Do you think Renault might be as bad as they were at Spa? They might get knocked out in Q1. What do you think about that? And do you think Force India now have, going forward for the rest of the season, the best car in the midfield? What do you think about that? And where do you think as well, and I want you guys to answer this, where do you guys think Force India will end up in the Constructors? Right now, because they dropped down, because they relinquished those points, they are currently in P9, 1 point behind Sauber. And I'm trying to think how many points behind Toro Rosso. I think it's 10 or 11 points. Where do you guys think they're going to finish in the Constructors? I think they'll definitely finish 8th, at least. But I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if, or sorry, 7th. But I don't think they will, it wouldn't be a surprise if they were to catch and beat McLaren. Because McLaren, I'm not even sure if they're going to score points for the rest of the season. They're that poor. They are that poor right now. So what do you guys think about that? I will look at the chat now and see what some of you guys are saying. Hamish Gaffney, Force India will end up in 7th. Okay. Just looking through the chat now. Simon Cragland, Spa and Monza is obviously suiting their car, but I don't know if Force India can maintain that kind of pace going into Singapore. According to Ted Kravitz on Sky Sports F1, Force India have a massive upgrade package coming for the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, I don't know if that's going to mean that, you know, they're still going to be best of the rest. I don't know, but it's, you know, there's a possibility that might be able to maintain that with the upgrades that are coming to the car. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. Sarah Lee says, even though Williams and McLaren are last, their name will keep them going a little longer than other smaller teams that have left. I agree. I think with Williams, I think it'll get to a situation where they might have to kind of auction off the team in terms of investment, because I think by 2020, you know, don't be surprised if Williams are looking seriously and very furiously for a new investor or a new buyer, because Martini are leaving at the end of this season. The Stroll family, you know, Lance Stroll's in the car, but Lawrence Stroll has took his money and put it into Force India. Once all that money is gone, what are Williams going to do? There's no guarantee that even with that money that next year they were going to design a good car. So if next year they have the slowest car and their car is so bad once again, and they don't have that money that they had, you know, at the start of this year, what do Williams do? I'm afraid there's only one answer for that. That's go out of business. I do not see how Williams, say by, you know, between now and 2023, I don't see how Williams gets to 2023 unless someone buys the team or massively invests in the team. And if that doesn't happen, I don't see how Williams can survive an F1 past 2022, 2023. I do not see it. Legendary Snipers, my version of Fernando is faster than you, Fernando. My McLaren P1 is faster than your McLaren F1 car. Probably is, you know, the McLaren car the McLaren F1 car right now is so bad. Blessed you, if a crash happens like what happened in Spa, who bears the costs of the repairs? I think they all have to pay for their own damage. I think they said this on Sky F1. I can't remember the exact words, but I think it was something like the teams can't demand payment from other teams for repairs because then, I don't know, it's illegal. I can't remember what the exact wording was, but the other teams can't pay for other teams' damage. It has to be out of their own pocket, I'm afraid, for those teams, such as, who was it? Renault, Sauber, and McLaren. And Renault, Red Bull as well. So those are the teams that had to pay for their own damage. But we'll move on from those midfield teams and go on to the rest of the teams. Here is Williams, and they're not the slowest, which is not a massive surprise because this track should suit the Williams car, but they're still not going to get out of Q1. The car, at best, will end up in 16th or 17th. I know that's on the edge of getting into Q2, but that's the best I see from them. Realistically, I think they'll still end up in 18th or 19th. They're that slow still. Around the corners, that chassis not performing well at all. Toro Rosso are not great, I'd say. I think there's more pace to come this weekend. I think in qualifying they will improve and they might be on the edge of getting into Q3, and in the race they might be able to nick a point like they did at the Belgian Grand Prix. But at the moment, not looking good for Toro Rosso. I think, again, more pace left in that car. Maybe this track is one step too far for the Honda Power Unit in terms of trying to compete with Mercedes customer teams and Ferrari customer teams. Maybe there's just too many straights and this track is too power hungry for that engine, but we'll see in qualifying and the race as well. Next up is Haas. Again, not looking that good. I have to say, I don't think Haas have the best car in the midfield anymore. I think that's Force India. I think Force India, with the upgrades they have brought, are now weighing clear of Haas. But again, as I said in my preview, which by the way you can check out, is in the description down below. I uploaded it yesterday. I don't think Haas need to really focus on being the best team in the midfield or best of the rest. All they need to focus on is beating Renault. And not only beating Renault, but beating them and scoring points. If they can do that, then they will finish in 4th. They don't need to be up there with Force India anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if Haas didn't develop the car that much for the last few races, because I don't think they need to develop the car massively going forward for the rest of this season, because they have such great engine power over Renault that even if the Renault is out developing them, I'm not sure Renault can still beat them, because again, Haas in a straight line and the aero is still very good. So, Haas's focus just has to be on beating Renault, and I think they will do that by the end of 2018. And I think by the end of this race weekend, I think they will be ahead of Renault in the Constructors' Championship. And finally is Sauber, and you could argue that this team and this driver, Marcus Ericsson, is the headline of the day. What a crash this was. I believe that this crash, this was in practice 2 by the way, if you have not heard about it or seen it. Marcus Ericsson was going down the pit straight at the start of practice 2. I think this was his 3rd flying lap or 2nd flying lap. He's coming into the braking zone for the first chicane, and his DRS, I think, when I looked at the video footage, his DRS wouldn't shut. It would not shut when it was supposed to into the braking zone, and that caused his car to go to the left, into the wall, and send his car into multiple barrel rolls. Very, very scary accident. I'm pleased to announce that he is fine. He is not injured or in any way. He should be able to do practice 3 qualifying and the race. But I have to say, very, very lucky. This could have been a fatal accident. It was absolutely massive. One of the biggest crashes I think I've ever seen at this race. It was very reminiscent of, I think, was it Derek Warwick in 1990 or 91? I can't remember the exact year, but I think it was the early 1990s. Very reminiscent in the way the car just flipped and barrel rolled. Very scary accident. And going forward for him, I don't think he will be able to finish in the points after this, because his car is going to have to be massively rebuilt. And, you know, the feeling in the car is not going to be the same as it was, you know, before that accident. So I'm not sure Ericsson really can contend massively for points after this accident, because just look how big it was. What a crash that was. But Charles Leclerc was in P9 in practice 2. He didn't do a lot of running in practice 2 because they were scared that the DRS activator on his rear wing was broken as well. So they had to keep him in the garage. And I think they replaced his rear wing to be sure. You know, they sent him out and he finished up in P9. But Sauber right now, I don't think are very concerned about what the pace of their car is. They're more concerned about why this crash happened and could it affect them in practice 3, in qualifying, or the race. We don't know. We'll have to see. Hopefully it doesn't, but what a massive crash that was. But guys, what do you think about Williams? Do you think Williams could sneak a car into Q2? Do you think Toro Rosso could score points and be very impressive like they were back in Spa? Do you think Haas can get into the top 10 in qualifying and score some decent points to beat Renault, which is their sole and primary aim? And what do you think about this accident on screen? Do you think, do you think he was lucky to get away with his life? And what do you think of Sauber for the rest of the weekend after this accident? Do you think this changes their weekend? What do you think, guys, about what has happened there? Blesstube, this was a very massive crash. The DRS failure just turned him into a passenger. It did. Once your DRS fails, there's nothing you can do. And I think the DRS failing on you is one of the most dangerous things now on an F1 car that can go wrong, because, you know, into a heavy braking zone, you cannot have that DRS open, because it is going to severely hamper the stability, the braking stability of the car going into the chicane. And if your DRS is open, as you said, he's a passenger. He can't do anything. Just looking, Hamish Gaffney, does anyone know if there's any chance of rain for quali or the race? I don't know myself. I have not checked the weather forecast, but I'll take a look after this live stream. Legendary Snipers, that was one of the worst crashes of 2018, no doubt about it. I think maybe this was it worse than the Spa start line crash? I don't think so, but it was probably the second worst, I would say, of 2018 so far. Of course, Ericsson had a big one at Silverstone as well, where his car, I think the DRS broke on that car as well, or it might have. So this might be more than just a singular issue for him and the Sauber. Sarah Lee, totally surprised by the performance of the Renault car. Should be stronger than they are. Hope it gets better for Danny Rick next year. I have to say, though, for this season, Renault, after pre-season testing, I thought Renault would clearly be fourth at the races in terms of pace and in the constructors. Very similar to how Force India were clearly fourth last year. But this year, Renault, I don't really think at any race except the Canadian Grand Prix, I don't think Renault have had the best of the rest car out of that midfield scrap. You've had Haas for most of the races, you've had Force India. You've never really, except Canada, had Renault. And coming into this season after the preseason testing where they looked so impressive, I'm very surprised that that has transpired. I thought Renault would clearly finish 4th and might be able to sneak a surprise podium like Perez did in Baku, but it just has not come off for Renault. And, you know, Renault have progressed this year. That's clear to see that, but they have not progressed enough in my opinion. They should be solidly with both cars in P7, P8, getting the points and finishing in 4th. They should not be barely hanging on for their lives for 4th in the Constructors ahead of Haas, who, in comparison, Renault should be not only beating Haas, they should be destroying Haas. Haas are such a small team in comparison. So it's actually quite embarrassing that Renault are, you know, getting beaten quite a lot by Haas. And I know Haas have help from Ferrari with the power unit and some of the parts of their car, but Haas still have to make that go fast. And they have, but Renault should be beating them. There is no excuse for Renault to be, you know, in this position where they're about to lose 4th in the Constructors' Championship. Just looking at more questions and comments. JB, if Force India kept their points before Spa, they would get 4th in the Constructors. Yeah, I think they would. I definitely think they would. I think they would probably get that by Russia or Japan if they kept their points. So, yeah, but they had to do that if they wanted to create this new team. Legendary Snipers, I hope Abu Dhabi won't be as bad this year. If it goes down to the final race in the title battle, I'm praying to God that Abu Dhabi, for the first time and the only time since 2012, throws up a good race. Bless Doob, Renault fell away after the upgrades at the French Grand Prix. Their competitors, Simple, had better upgrades. Renault have not recovered since. You are right, at that race, Haas were way faster than Renault, which was quite a surprise. And since then, I think Haas have had the faster car at pretty much every race. You could argue Hungary, but Haas were very quick there. So yeah, I'd agree. Just looking at more comments here. Josh Basong, Daniel Ricciardo, C-Spec engine only lasted minutes, lol. That's just the way Renault are, aren't they? That's just the way Renault are. But we'll move on from reviewing the teams and go on to a couple bits of news that's happened today. First off, in F2, George Russell has took pole position, a very important pole position going into the feature race. If you did not know, you do get points for pole position. I can't remember how many. They do have, I think, the same scoring system in the races as F1, or mostly in F1. But a very important pole position there, and I think this is the 3rd to last race. So again, very, very important. And if he can win tomorrow, then I think Russell is pretty much nailing down the F2 championship for this year. And I really do hope he's in F1 next year. I have seen some rumours that Artem Markelov might be at Williams next year alongside Sorokin. Now, Markelov is a very good driver, but George Russell, for one, this is his first year in F2 and he's about to win, or, you know, should win the F2 championship. Markelov's been in F2 for, what, 5 years? And he's had some great race wins, but he is very inconsistent and there are a lot of issues with his driving. There are lots of great things with his driving, but there are, lots of issues. So I really do hope that Russell gets into F1 next year. He really does deserve it, and hopefully it is with Williams. But there was also some other news today, and it's this. This is the 2019 F1 calendar. There are a couple changes in terms of dates. There are going to be, I think, 21 races, the same as this year. Germany does keep its place on the calendar. Good to see, because the attendance at this year's German Grand Prix was, I think, way better than they were expecting. So that is good to see. So Australia starting a week earlier than last year, and that means pre-season testing will start, I think, 3 or 4 days after Valentine's Day, say February the 18th, something like that. So all good to see there. You have the British Grand Prix being pushed back a week, meaning there will not be a triple header, thank God, because even though the racing was very good, it was very exhausting as a content creator to upload that many videos in that short space of time. Singapore and Russia is now a back-to-back, I believe. Yes, it is. Mexico will now take place ahead of the US Grand Prix. And the final race of 2019 on the Sunday will take place on the 1st of December. I believe that is the first time an F1 race has took place in December, or will take place in December, since 1965 or 64. I think the South African Grand Prix in the 60s, there was one where it took place, I think, on Christmas Day. Something ridiculous like that, or New Year's Day. Or New Year's Eve, sorry. So, yeah, I think that's the first race since the mid-1960s where we will have a race in December. What do you guys think about the calendar? Is there anything interesting for you guys? Of course, there's no Miami Grand Prix. I think that would have took place a week before Mexico. That's what I think they were going to go for. And they would have pushed Singapore back. They would have pushed Japan back a week to allow the Miami Grand Prix to take place on the 20th. So, yeah, what do you guys think about the 2019 F1 calendar? Anything you would have liked to have seen more than other races? Of course, I would have loved to have seen Russia and Abu Dhabi get removed from the calendar. But, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? I never hoped the Nürburgring comes back to F1. That track was bad. That's from Legendary Snipers. I have to disagree, and I disagree massively. That track was way better than some of the tracks you're seeing on the screen right now. I would say the Nürburgring is better than Russia, better than Abu Dhabi, Mexico, France, Austria, Hungary, China maybe. It's a very good track. Spain as well. The Nürburgring is a very, very good track, and I wish it was on the calendar as the German Grand Prix instead of Hockenheim. I think it's a better track than Hockenheim is, but it looks like the Nürburgring's never really going to come back until they get new owners who actually have a bit of money to pay for a contract. That's what the issue is, I believe, at the moment. But yeah, that is the 2019 F1 calendar, and hopefully next year is very good in terms of the racing. Of course, we have regulation changes for next year. The front wing, the rear wing, some parts aerodynamically are changing. So hopefully that means we will get some good racing next year. But now, guys, we are going to go on to the Q&A. I only have about 5 or just over 5 minutes. So please get your questions in now, and I will answer them for the next 5 or so minutes before I head off and get tomorrow's qualifying watch-along ready. What single track would you remove from the calendar? For me, easily Russia. Would never have. We've never had a good Russian Grand Prix. That's from JB. Yep, I would remove Russia. I would get rid of Abu Dhabi. And that'd be about it. I think the calendar mostly is good. I think a lot of the races are placed in good positions. I think some races, you know, the tracks they're at, they should be at different tracks in the same country. But I think most of the calendar is very good. It's just those 2 races I do not like, Russia and Abu Dhabi. And I would replace Russia and Abu Dhabi with the Nürburgring and the Turkish Grand Prix, Istanbul Park. What a track that was. I can't believe we're not still racing at Turkey. That was such a good racing track. Tonka Toy Truck. Looks like Liberty Media is struggling to keep the number of races per year at status quo and losing money doing it. I think Liberty Media, I think they're kind of frustrated with the calendar that they're having to go with. I think there's a lot of races they want to put on the calendar, but they just can't. They just can't do it, and I think they're finding it, you know, frustrating. And I think harder maybe than they thought it would be to construct a calendar. It's very hard to get some races on the calendar. So, yeah, we'll have to see what they introduce on the calendar in the next few years. I think the Miami Grand Prix, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think that's very much like the New Jersey Grand Prix that was supposed to happen in 2013, but it never did. I think it's going to be another one of those. I think the next American race will take place somewhere in the south, either in Florida, Nevada, or California. That's where I think the next US Grand Prix venue will come from. McLaren is no longer a midfield team. That's from Gina. Yeah, they're pretty much a backmarker team. They are. They're very, very slow. Will this continue to next year? I hope not. I really do hope not. So, it's very sad for McLaren. You know, they're such a successful team, such a historic team, but they're ran so poorly. There's no structure to that team. There's no plan of where to go. That's one of the biggest issues with McLaren. I was thinking about this actually the other night, is with McLaren, there's just no plan. You know, like team like Renault, even though Renault are not where they want to be and they are not where they should be, at least with Renault, they have a plan of where they want to be in 2020 or 2021 or 2023. McLaren don't have a plan of where they want to go and what they want to be in 5 years' time like Renault do. Or I'm sure Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull have this plan, but McLaren don't, because they just make panic decisions like getting rid of Honda for Renault, and then they face the consequences of, again, basically panicking. That's all they do is panic. Canada has become a funeral procession. It was only one race. Most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, the Canadian Grand Prix is at least good. So at the Belgian Grand Prix, you know, the Belgian Grand Prix was not good, but that's not a representation of what the race is normally like. It was just a one-off. JB, I was expecting Alonso to get a race win this season and Van Dorn getting a podium. I was really made to expect this much from McLaren. The person or the people that made you expect that was McLaren. They drilled it into people, and I fell for it as well. I'll admit that they had the best chassis on the grid. This year is clear evidence that they don't even have the fourth best chassis on the grid. They are nowhere near best chassis. Nowhere near. They created that, and that's one thing that needs to stop from McLaren. This hype train they create going into the winter, and that they do in the pre-season testing about, oh, we're going to be so great, we're going to be this, we're going to be that, we're going to win this, we're going to finish on the podium here, we're going to win this championship. Stop that and just focus on short-term gains, because you're not going to win a race for at least 5 years. Just focus on, you know, reality. The reality is you're not going to win a race for 5 years. So stop with this fake, you know, reality you're creating. If they had the best chassis last year, they would have won Monaco, to be honest. With a Renault power unit, and if they did have the best chassis last year, yeah, maybe they would have. But this year is clear evidence that they don't. Legendary Snipers, I wish IndyCar deserves to go to Baku, but the American only racing is just ridiculous. Well, you know, that's what they do. IndyCar is an American series, and that's never going to change. If they want to make IndyCar a much bigger business, then they would have to go worldwide. They would have to, but I don't think they're ever going to, because all of their fans, or most of their fans, are American. So I don't see it being successful for them. I'm not sure many people will turn up for an IndyCar race in Italy or Germany. I don't see a massive attendance for those kinds of races. JB, how many F1 races have you attended and where were they? I've attended, sadly, only one F1 race. It was the 2014 Spanish Grand Prix, where Hamilton won from Rosberg. and Daniel Ricciardo was about a minute behind in third. That's just how dominant the two Mercedes were. I am planning, though, next year to be going to at least one race, and I will be covering that on the channel. I can confirm that. I'm going to try and go to a race next year. At least one, maybe more. We'll see what happens. But yeah. B Hassan 786. Do you think McLaren will ever surpass Renault under the same power? Nope, they won't, because their chassis is miles off the Renault. So I don't see that happening. And I think McLaren need to focus on developing a plan of where to go instead of this, you know, panic decision thing they do. Right, the final question is from Tonka Toy Truck. Is Force India going to surprise us again and finish best of the rest at the Italian Grand Prix? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I think in qualifying, if the two Red Bulls and the two Ferraris and two Mercedes do not have any issues, I think Force India will line up in P7 and P8. And I think in the race, they could get a P6 or a P5, only depending on issues for cars ahead. But yeah, I think they'll be best of the rest in this race. Will they be best of the rest in Singapore? We'll see. We will definitely see in 2 weeks' time. But guys, just to show you before I go, this is my upload schedule going forward for this weekend. Of course, the first part of this weekend's schedule is right now. We're about to end this. Saturday, qualifying watch along live at 1 PM British summertime. So don't forget to come around for that. We'll be live for about 2.5 hours with an hour's build up, then an hour of watching qualifying, and then half an hour of reacting to what we've just seen. Then a proper recorded qualifying review will be out sometime between 8 PM and 10 PM that evening. Sunday will be live an hour before the race at 1:10, again with an hour's build up. Then we'll watch the race. Then I will come off the stream, say about 3 or 4 minutes after the race finishes. Then the race reaction will be coming up live at 4:30 PM. That will be live for about an hour or just under an hour. Then Monday, there will be a proper recorded race review at 4 PM British summertime. And then a post-race Q&A live for about half an hour to 40 minutes where you guys can ask me questions and I will answer them for, again, half an hour to 40 minutes and interact with you guys. Something I really do like doing at the moment. You guys are very, very interactive at the moment. It's great to see that. But that is the schedule. Memorize it, save it, screenshot it, I don't know. But this is what the schedule is going forward for this weekend. But that is it, guys, for this stream. Don't forget to subscribe. You can either do it on the bottom right of the screen or click on my channel name or click on the link that goes to my channel page to subscribe there. Like this video, comment down below if you have anything to say. If you could not make the stream when it went live, then please do comment down below. As well, don't forget to join our Discord server. A link to that is in the description. We have about 60 people now, I think, in that server. So it'd be great for you to join. We have a great community over there, so hopefully you do. Follow me on Twitter down in the description as well. And as well, check out my website. That is also in the description, chazerhd.com. where you can check out all the content over there as well. But thank you guys for coming along for the Practice 1 and Practice 2 review. And I will see all of you for the qualifying watch along at 1 PM tomorrow live on ChazerHD F1.